Okay. The Finance Committee has adjourned in closed session with no action to be taken. So Finance is done for this evening, and ED will continue.
I'll let you guys sit.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so the Economic Development Committee moved to return to open session, and we'll continue on with our agenda. So number 4 is approval of minutes from July 5th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, Alder Rasmussen, second.
Second.
Alder Hanky. Is there any additional comments, corrections that you see? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, minutes have been approved. Moving on to number 5, discussion and possible action approving Wausau Poet Laureate. Director Burdick.
Sure. So City Planner Brad Lenz was not able to be here tonight, so I'm going to take this item for him. But really, everything is explained in the memo and the resolution that are included in the packet. So I guess, do you have any questions?
Is, this is a replacement?
Yes, so the Poet Laureate is a 2-year award, I guess, or placement. And so Dawn Anderson is the current Poet Laureate. Her term is expiring this fall. It's an October to October term.
Did the previous person come through economic development?
Yes.
Okay.
It's because it comes through the Arts Commission. It's like a subcommittee essentially, and so it has to come through a standing committee, and economic development is it for the Arts Commission.
Okay. I'll move to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Alder Lukens. Any other questions, comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion approved for that Wausau Poet Laureate. Number 6 is discussion and possible action approving First Amendment to Foundry and Third LLC Development Agreement. Director Burdick.
Yes, so as you know, the Foundry on Third groundbreaking was delayed until spring, so we need an amendment to commemorate that. The original development agreement had a commencement deadline of 9/1/23. The First Amendment proposes moving it to June 1st of '24. And it amends the completion deadline from the current 12/31/24 to November 1st of '25. It also says that the minimum assessed value will be the determination, or the base year is 26 instead of 25, in anticipation of the project not being completed until 2025. Excuse me, and it also directly acknowledges that has the developer acknowledge that the reverse TIF payments may be impacted by the delayed start date, and we are not requesting any modification of financing, but they are aware that they may miss a year of TIF payments because of the delayed start.
All right, any questions for Director Burdick? Alder Rasmussen.
Not a question so much, but a comment. I mean, we knew already that there was going to be a groundbreaking delay on this. The other things that are happening on the mall site are in progress and happening. I mean, between the infrastructure, which is ours, and then the home furniture and the children's museum and whatnot. So I think that knowing that, and the fact that the developer is aware of the potential for the delay or the loss of the reverse increment payment based on that extra year. We have other logistical issues that we'll be discussing with them, I think, going forward in the future, but I think the timeline is in adherence with what we've been expecting based on the delay that they were seeing in terms of both plan approval and their investors. So I'll move that we approve the extension.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Alder Hanky. All right, any other discussion or questions? Alder Killian.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I have a question for Attorney Jacobson, if she'd be willing to address it, and that's okay with the chair.
Go ahead.
Yes, so the the agreement we're amending, what was the original deadline on commencement?
I think Ms. Brodick just mentioned that. It was September 1st of '23.
Okay, and so what would happen then if we do not approve this amendment tonight?
Well, then they'd miss the commencement deadline of September 1st of '23.
And that's a commitment that had been made at a prior date?
Yes, in the original development agreement.
And who agreed to that?
WAS, representatives of WAS.
Okay, so was not the city of Wausau.
No, I'm sorry, it would have been Foundry on Third LLC.
So, okay, the city of
Yeah, that's their
Wausau.
development agreement. I'm thinking WAS, the ownership of the property,
Okay,
but,
so the Foundry then,
right, we have a development agreement with Foundry on Third LLC. And this is to amend that one, which is right at the top of the First Amendment, yes.
so we've kept our end of the deal thus far to date in your awareness.
Yes,
So they agreed to start September 1st. That's the agreement we'd be amending. And if we did not approve this amendment, would they then be in breach of the agreement if they did not commence on or before September 1st?
I believe that would be an event of default.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the only question I had there. And then I do have some questions for ED staff because it does seem like the sequence of events was not necessarily the result of City of Wausau's lack of sticking to what we had agreed upon. My understanding is that without any consulting of the city, that board had voted to allow an extension on this development. Is that understanding correct?
That is my understanding, but we don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. And we do, I would also note, we have Nick Patterson from T-Wall and Chuck Gadorsey, who's the managing director of WAS here, in case that's helpful for
Well,
questions.
I could ask Mr. Gadorsey if you're not certain.
I have no firsthand knowledge, so I would not feel comfortable saying like 100% we know that.
Well, then I'll ask Mr. Gadorsey.
So would you repeat the question?
Yes, thank you. So this extension that had been apparently approved by WAS for the development, is my understanding correct that the WAS board had approved that extension?
The WAS board has considered that extension, and they will be approving an extension for T-Wall.
But that has not been approved yet?
It's been approved by the board. It has not been passed on.
When did the board approve that, Mr. Gadorsey?
I'm not sure, the exact date of that.
But were they aware that they were approving a potential extension that could lead to a default of an agreement that had been agreed to? Apparently, the commencement deadline was September 1st.
As it was with us,
Yes.
correct.
So it was aware that the delay could result in default of the agreement.
It was aware that it would require an amendment to the agreement in order to extend it, yes.
Okay, well, thank you. That's the information that's helpful there. I have a few more questions for ED staff. So now we know that, yes, the WAS board had approved an extension, which then likely would have caused a delay that could result in default of the agreement we had. My understanding was, because I'd looked at DNR documents, that they had left the cement in place, the floor of parts of the mall to act as kind of a default cap over contaminated soil. I believe is that correct, Ms. Brodick?
That's my understanding. I know that our DPW and engineering staff have been in weekly meetings about these things. ED staff has not been. So I can do my best to
I know,
answer
I
questions, but
understand
I
that.
don't want to tell you something that I truly don't know all of.
I completely understand. Are they in the room? Anybody from DPW tonight?
No.
Okay, so, well, I can speak from, I guess, reviewing DNR documents and city documents that appeared to be the case. So what happened then when that soil was supposed to be removed? Does anybody know?
I think that there's the DPW staff would be helpful in understanding the sequence of events and the timeline to everything. I know we've had internal meetings trying to piece this together. I don't have all the dates for this and how all of this has happened and what the expectations were of who to do what when. So there's a lot. I apologize, I can't answer your questions right now. If you wanted to give me a list of questions to kind of get information back on, we can certainly talk to DPW staff to get a better understanding of all of this.
Well, actually, I would like to do that. My request would be not to do that ex post facto after a vote. I would like the public and the body to have all of the relevant information before this committee would take action. I think doing it after the fact would be illogical and rather risky since we wouldn't have the information. But I guess my next question, if ED is not aware, I would ask the city attorney if she's aware what happened with the sequence of events related to soil removal.
I am not aware firsthand, but I would think the person in the room that would know would be Mr. Gadorzi, who's representing the owner of the property,
Okay.
was, if
Thank-
anyone in the room might know.
Thank you. Mr. Gadorzi, if you'd be kind enough, sorry to make it get back up again, but so was the soil to be removed? And if so, could you, if you know, describe the sequence of events for us on what occurred with that soil removal?
Well, it is a requirement that the city take care of the contaminated fill. That's a requirement of whether it's in the roadway or whether it's in one of the project sites. So the cap was removed in terms of the streets in Block 4, and the purpose of removing that cap was so that the utility work could start appropriately that was being designed by Becker and Hoppy. That was a key factor in removing the cap. We also removed the cap on Block 4 so that if there was not a delay relative to Foundry on 3rd, that could also occur. So now that it hasn't occurred, the process will be that we'll continue with our utilities and we'll continue to cap the site in the future if construction does not start with 3 inches of road base, all of which follows in line with what is required.
And do you recall who made the decision to not have soil removed?
I did.
Okay.
And it was very simple. If we weren't going to start a project, we weren't going to put a hole in the middle of our downtown. So I made the call.
And so there had been someone who was planning to remove the soil, and you made the call to not have them remove the soil.
That's correct. They were under contract to remove the soil, which was an obligation relative to the city, and the city responded very favorably in terms of being ready for that.
Sure. And when you said that it was under contract, do you know with who would be picking up the tab for the soil remover that was supposed to do that?
Well, the tab would have been picked up, again, in the responsibility of the developers agreement. It is the city who would move those soils which are contaminated out to Marathon County landfill.
So if I'm understanding the sequence correctly, the cap was left there to cover some contamination. It was removed, and it had been planned that after that removal, the soil would then be taken away. But then there was a delay, one that the WAS board apparently approved at some time without consulting the city. The city had arranged for soil to be removed already. That was rejected. You said you made the call, WAS did, to deny that. So if someone shows up to perform a service or is ready to, what happens then when that work is rejected?
Well, again, I made the call not to do it, and I think it was the right call, still is. So I contacted our contact at the city, Eric Lidman, and I said to Eric, essentially, we aren't ready to remove those soils. And so that was the sequence. And after that, we proceeded to say, okay, what is a timely date that we would hope that we could get started? Could it still be this year, or would it have to extend beyond that? And so at that point, we met with T-Wall and tried to figure out what their timeline would be and what things they still had to do. And at that point, then we said, we're willing to extend that contract and see if it can't still happen.
And do you know, I mean, might that be an additional cost to the city since we had contracted that initially?
There might be. I mean, there's some consequences to breaking contracts and et cetera, so there could be some consequences to that.
Can I have you pause for a second, just
Yes.
while you're Killian? I want to just consult Attorney Jacobson. Is this outside of the scope of the agenda item that we're talking about, or is this sort of still within? I just want to make sure that it's agendized and we're talking about the appropriate things. Sorry to pause you, Alder Killian.
I think it's really up to your committee to decide, but my opinion is it's probably germane. I mean, you're asking for an amendment to a development agreement. I mean, I think anything associated with that development would be within the realm of discussion if it may impact their decision on whether to amend an agreement.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I can also, I've only got one more question for Mr. Gadorzi, and then I can clarify for the chair why this is highly germane.
Okay, sounds
Thank
great.
you. So the last one, and we talked about this a little bit when WAS gave the update, the cap and so forth. So now that we know it had been removed, the cement, that the city was going to have soil removed, apparently we'd contracted that. WAS made the decision to reject those services, potentially, apparently, from what I just heard, at additional cost to the city now in the future. Now that there's going to be potentially a very long delay, what do you think does the DNR have a perspective on what will need to happen with the uncapped soil? Are they going to just allow it to be left uncapped when a large percentage of it was presumed to be contaminated?
Well, understand there's two parts to removing the cap. The cap is removed for 2nd Street. The cap is removed for the Green Forum that extends across in front of Children's Imaginarium. It extends down Jackson Street, and it extends down 3rd. That cap is removed for the purposes of installing utilities, which is part of the plan. When that's completed, then that will have to be capped with 3 inches of road base. That is an approved system with the DNR, and we've been in contact with the DNR specifically regarding that. If Block 4 does not get started, then we'll do the same for Block 4. We'll cap Block 4 with 3 inches of road base. That is a very acceptable method with the DNR, and essentially they have approved that.
Okay, well, thank you for that information. I appreciate it. I had a lot of questions. Thank you. So, and Madam Chair, since you asked, the reason I find it highly germane is because, one, I think it's important for the body and the public to know the facts of the sequence of events that led to this, and not to downplay the initial presentation. And it was very good and enlightening, but I think in this case what we're seeing is those were not from macro factors. And what we learned tonight from the information we just received in these responses was that we had an agreement. The city had met its part of the agreement. Without consulting the city, WAS apparently approved an extension that presumably was going to result in default of an agreement that was already in place. And apparently throughout the course of all these events, WAS then also rejected the services of the soil removal that apparently the city had contracted, and we now learn here tonight that that may cost the city even more money, and the cap is becoming a problem the longer this delay goes on. So I think it's important when we approach and vote on this tonight that not only we are discussing all of the facts as they stand realistically, but that the public is also aware of them. And unfortunately, to date, they had not been aware of many of these matters. And in conclusion, I'd say since these things occurred with the knowledge it would likely result in the default of an agreement that had already been committed to. Services were rejected that the city had contracted, now going to cost us likely even more money on those services, that we should not approve an extension. My recommendation to our partners in the private sector would be get started, because you agreed to a September 1st commencement deadline. And my second bit of recommendation would be next time you come to the city, make sure you've got the money to pay for the development that you contractually committed to. So I would say in the city's defense that many of these obstacles were not on its part. But thank you for the time to ask those questions, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
Any other questions, comments? Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I think that one thing we have to recognize here is that what we are doing is, and with the revitalization of the mall site and with this particular agreement, it has an awful lot of moving parts. We essentially, with regard to dealing with the mall, are operating in a three-way partnership between WAS, who now owns the land, the city, who has infrastructure obligations to facilitate traffic movement and pedestrian movement there, and the developers that are going to build there, whoever they might be. I do think that there needs to be an element of good faith in our behavior and in our negotiations. Now, we have known as a city, both the council, this committee, and our staff have known for months that there was going to be a delay on this project. And so for us to not approve an extension when we were told months ago exactly what was in play, we just got an update recently from the developer with a list of things that they either have resolved or have in progress in terms of plan review, both at the local and state level. They're expending funds to move this project forward on a timeline. It's not the aggressive, fast timeline that we want, but they're spending money toward a project that we as a committee and a council agreed to. We approved a conceptual plan and we negotiated in good faith. We have a development agreement. I think it's wrong for us to now at this late hour not approve the extension when we have been behaving such that we were moving in that direction in parity with WAS, who owns the land. I mean, whether they, the delay they approved is always going to be contingent upon the extension and agreement that we have to approve. That these things walk hand in hand. And I said for us now to not move forward with the extension, that really is like in us intentionally creating default on the part of one of those parties. We knew there was a delay. We knew what the cause of the delay was. We've been receiving updates both from the developer and from WAS as far as where we're heading. Everything other than Block 4 is moving forward. The streets are under construction. The home furniture thing has taken place. The Imaginarium is going to open in October. I mean, wheels are turning. So when you get to that point where you're underway with this stuff, at the end of the day, whether this project is as fast as we want or not, we all need to be able to work together and breathe new life into our downtown, where right now there is a 6 square block vacancy. And so it doesn't do us a whole lot of good to step into this tonight, create intentional default, on the part of the developer, burn the bridge with the developer. We've already done that with River Life. And there were reasons for that. It happened, it's over. But at this point, if we're going to move forward in a productive partnership, it really doesn't do us any good on principle to light all of that on fire and then expect them to deliver the product at the end of this contract. If you want to go back to square one and, pull the plug again and start completely over, and then set yourself back, a couple extra years on generating any tax base down there, I think that's what you get when you don't approve at least this. This is the first extension. It's not the second, third, fourth. I mean, we've had issues with extensions for developers. I myself have said, I'm going to vote for this second one, but I don't want to see a third. And at some point, there is a point where you cut bait on things like that. But it's certainly not with modification number one, when we all have been looped in on the communication for what they're up against. And whether or not we, like the timeline, the economy is what it is. No one asked for this economy. It's what you get post-pandemic when you're in a inflated economic society where everything costs more and takes longer than you want it to take. So, I think the item on our agenda tonight is really the timeline. It's not, who made this decision and who didn't shovel dirt on this day. At the end of the day, if we have to go back as partners and talk about the fact that delay of excavating that soil cost us a little extra money because we had hired a guy to come and dig out the dirt and he didn't dig it out, well, then we're going to have to figure out who's going to maybe reimburse who for some of that stuff. But that's not tonight. Tonight is just, do we want to approve this agreement to give ourselves the ability to continue forward? Because if we don't, I really feel like that's a bad faith situation. I mean, that really is a poor look for us as one of the three partners to undertake. To me, that seems underhanded. I mean, yes, we have the authority to approve or deny, but how do you look when you get to a point where you're really not behaving as an earnest partner? You're leveraging that authority in a negative way. So I would hope that we would approve the extension and that everyone involved is on notice that we all are partners and that we all need to communicate and move forward together. And, that if one decision is going to cost other folks money and cost other people time, that the communication is a key component of that. But that's certainly not a reason to drown the whole project. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Alder Hanky.
Yeah, I just really worry about what not approving this would cost us. I think that's going to be way more. I can't think of what it would be off the top of my head exactly, but I have a feeling that would be way more than defaulting on a contract to move a cap and put it back. Thank you.
Any other? Alder Lukens.
So, I'm concerned about, obviously, the timeline. I think everyone wants this to get done as soon as possible. Because I know I hear from constituents all the time, like, when is this going to get going? But I guess I was kind of curious, since I'm a new, one of the newer members on this committee, what others on the committee, any questions, what they thought, what they felt, or what staff, and we did approve, this before we had the recent updates, but, so I was just kind of curious if you had anything else, Ms. Brodeck, to add to it. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I don't have much to add. I would just say, the presentation that I made tonight was, like I said, in part driven by this, because it is an equity. My understanding from talking to T-Wall is, and WAS, is that there are equity components to this that basically they need investors, and investors have been really slow to come. So that caused me to dig in and understand a little bit more about why that is. So in doing that, like I said, I found all of the things that I presented tonight, but more than anything, it's the thing that was driven home to me was that it's not just this developer, it's not just this project, and it's not just here. Especially in finding equity investors, that problem is everywhere. They're just wanting to invest in things other than real estate right now. And equity investment has become a key strategy in real estate development. So it's understandable that T-Wall relied on that as part of its capital stack. And as a larger, more experienced developer, I have faith that they will come through with that. I would also point out that, you know, when we talk about like skepticism and optimism about this project, T-Wall has already invested tons of money. I have no idea, Nick, if you even want to disclose that, but I know it's you know, north of tens of thousands. I would imagine, given everything that I see that they've done, that it's closer to 100, you know, 100-ish thousand. Again, I don't know, but I know it's enough that I have faith that this is coming. But that, you know, we're in a perfect storm of factors right now that are making development really difficult. So, and I know we've had, you know, concerns about like, well, we just don't want to see another extension. We don't either. So, like staff doesn't, obviously the committee, and I highly doubt council does. I don't think WAS does. I don't think T-Wall does. I think everyone wants to get this going as quickly as possible. But again, I would, you know, I always like hearing from the developer, so if you wanted to ask any questions of Nick representing T-Wall, or I see the mayor's up here, so I'll let her
Yeah,
talk.
I do have a question for the developer, and I feel weird like this, but I'm going to ask it to you because this is how it is. Are we sure that this is the right date then? I mean, 9 months is an extension. It feels like not too much time. That is this going to help us get where we need to go? Is that the right amount of time? Can you be confident in market shifting and investors and all of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I can, and I kind of talked about this last meeting too, but I can never guarantee an exact date because there's, as Liz mentioned, there's certain economic factors that development is dynamic. We're always having to adapt every single day. Something's changing, whether that's rates, development costs. There's a ton of different factors. But given that, I am confident June 1st of next year will be enough time. I don't like to come back to you guys and ask for another extension. That's the last thing we want. So that's why I'm confident in June 1st. And it's never coming back to you for an extension, but there's some things that are out of our control. And we're all in on this development. We've sunk millions into this project, and we're ready to get going. We're excited. So if we can do that this year, great. If not, we'll deliver by June 1st. But that's where we're at.
Any other questions or follow-up? Alder Lukens? You're good?
No, thank you.
Okay. Alder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to address some comments about kind of updates and transparency in this process. It was said we knew about these things for weeks or perhaps longer. And I think everyone in this body knows that there were meaningful, critical updates that we did not get until the final hour, and then we were put under a dubious confidentiality gag to keep information away from the public. So had I not been able to ask the questions tonight that I did, and had they not been answered in a way that provided rightful information to the public, I would have walked out of the room without voting on this because it would have been completely inappropriate. So the assertion that we have been provided timely, meaningful updates on why this all fell apart is patently inaccurate, and this has been routine. Okay, what we need, people understand and the community understands that sometimes things change or don't work out, and it's incumbent upon us to just be candid about that. And with transparency and accountability, I think often the public will understand. What they will not accept is to withhold critical information from them throughout the process. And I had problems with that in my first term, last term, with this same deal, and I have problems with it today. So I wanted to address just there had been a lack of timeliness and transparency within City Hall with this matter. And it was then asked, well, what would it cost if we didn't do this? I'll tell you what it wouldn't cost. It wouldn't cost $10.8 million in public subsidies, which we had committed to and probably would have kept our side of the deal on, even when our partners apparently had been planning not to meet contractual timelines that we'd already committed to. So what we have right now in the downtown in District 3, yes, there is hope. People want something there. They want something there that's helping our local businesses. Quite honestly, my priority as a District 3 representative is not an out-of-town developer. So I really don't care about the revenue or profit benefits to an out-of-town developer. What I care about is my constituents in my hometown, and what we need to see is something there very soon that is appropriate, substantial, is helping to support surrounding local small businesses. And what this has devolved into is just an expensive pile of rubble currently, okay? It's a dusty memorial to poor decision making. So when we have a contract, it's not being a bad partner to say, hey, we expect you to keep your end of the bargain. That's being a good partner, and a good partner on the other side would keep their end of the bargain. So this is not some trick about forcing or thrusting an entity into default. It was a representative of people for that district expecting that commitments are made before citizens and local businesses suffer any further. Thank you.
Any other questions or Alder Rasmussen?
I think it's just important for us to remember that what a lot of our downtown businesses really are suffering from, in addition to any of this, is continued ongoing delay. All of the things that will materialize on the mall site will cross-support what's already down there. And the longer we wait and the longer we leave things sit, the worse that becomes for everyone who needs that economic boost of new people living in downtown. There are fewer people working and officing in downtown than there were before the pandemic. So the key step out of this is to have people come home to downtown, live down there, and support the businesses that exist down there every day that we all know and appreciate. And so I think if we're going to create a climate where no one wants to partner with the city of Wausau, because this is how we act when something goes wrong, and the fact that we fry people in oil on live television in the interest of, fact-finding or whatever we do, we're going to create a climate where everyone suffers, because even though on the front end we might think we saved $10.1 million, we may sit for years because nobody wants to be our partner anymore, because we've created a climate that is developer adverse. And, while I think we all need to be honest and forthright in how we communicate with one another, and we need to be timely about that, I also think that we as a city have to be a good partner too, and we have to understand when there are either logistical or economic influences that are influencing timelines and deadlines, that we have to be able to grapple with that as well. We don't love it, but can we understand it? Yes. Can we work with it? Yes. Is there a top end to our patience? Absolutely. We've seen that on other projects. We've told other developers, build or get out. And those projects they're not here today. But I think as a committee, we have to be a fair player also. So hopefully we can take action on the deadline and we can all move forward.
All right. I think we're probably ready to vote at this point. All right. So all those in favor of approving the First Amendment to the Foundry on Third LLC development agreement, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
All right. 4 ayes, 1 no. Motion passes. Moving on to number 7, discussion and possible action on termination of lease agreement with Marathon County UW Extension, 700 Grand Avenue. Attorney Jacobson.
This was basically house cleaning for an oversight where we had formally terminated the lease with the UW Extension, who had previously leased from us the space at 700 Grand Avenue for their healing garden. As you all probably know, the trees were already relocated, and we just needed to document our file by formally terminating the lease and getting that on file with the clerk. So we're just asking for your approval to terminate the lease, as Commonwealth does have a planning option in effect at this time.
Awesome. Any questions for Attorney Jacobson? Is there a motion to approve? Alder Lukens moves to approve, second.
I'll say.
Alder Hanky. Again, any questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you.
I'm here for the next one, too.
Oh, okay. Yes, you are.
Save myself a few steps.
Yes,
I
exactly.
really need the steps. I probably should have walked back, but
Okay, item number 8 is amended. It's discussion and possible action of termination of recorded deed restrictions and recording set of revised deed restrictions for 145 South 84th Avenue, Rib Mountain Glass, Inc.
so Randy can step in and correct me if I'm wrong or just tie it up, but we're doing something similar we did with another property out in the industrial campus or the business campus most recently, when rather than making them go through the waiver of right of first refusal and get consent from the city pursuant to the old deed restrictions, they asked if we could just, well, and with each transfer, we've been trying to substitute the new deed restrictions and re-record those and then terminate the old restrictions. So on his suggestion and community development's consent, we're just taking one step out of this two-step process, and rather than present a waiver of right of first refusal and a consent to transfer, and then the termination of the old deed restrictions and recording of new ones, we're just going with the second piece, because once that's recorded, they won't need your consent, or give us an option to waive that right of first refusal. And as you know, the second set or the new set of deed restrictions we have in place have all of your concerns addressed in there, that should the purpose change or the use, it would still have to comply with zoning regulations. And if they transferred it to a tax exempt entity, they would still have to get consent from the city. So there are safeguards built into the new set of recorded deed restrictions. But that's what we're asking for your approval tonight on, is to allow this transfer to occur by approving a new set of deed restrictions to be recorded.
So just really cleaning up that contract so that we don't have to have it. come
And this
back around.
property actually is transferred twice before this, and nobody came to us and asked for permission under the old set, and we're no worse off. So this just streamlines this process a little bit.
Awesome. Is there a motion? Okay, Alder Lukens, is there a second? Alder Killian, any questions or discussion? Questions for Ann? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Number 9 is update on the River Concert Venue. Director Brodick.
Sure. So as you know from our report on our July 5th meeting, staff contacted almost a dozen firms for the feasibility study this committee had recommended at the June 6th meeting before pursuing this proposal more. We then narrowed those responses from those firms down to 3 and contacted the developers for an update to send proposals for their review. When we spoke to them to update on our progress with the feasibility study on a July 18th conversation, basically they informed us they didn't want to pay for the study because in their view, the city, because the city was requesting the study, the city should pay for it. We reminded them about the direction from committee on June 6th that was confirmed on July 5th. And that was that the developer pay for the study. So on that July 18th call, we told them that we would check with the chair of ED to confirm our understanding, and then we were able to speak with Chair Watson the next day. She confirmed the previous committee direction that the developers were to pay for the study. I wrote an email to the developers on July 21st informing them of the confirmation and let them know that unless they're willing to pay for the study, we can't move forward with the project, and that we would write the firms that had put in for the study that we would not move forward with this at this time. I also asked that they contact me if they change their mind with any questions. But that's
Awesome.
it.
And I think I remember from that meeting, the reason why I also confirmed that the study would be paid for by the developer was that we talked initially about an Ellers financial analysis. But I think Director Grote came in, that was when she attended our meeting, and said that probably wasn't a good first step because there isn't a lot of market information for it, right? Like at housing development or something like that. So we sort of switched gears and said that market study was sort of more of a priority. But I guess any questions from the committee about this update? Alder Rasmussen.
I have one. I mean, one of the things that we were concerned about was both feasibility in terms of not so much the concept, but the location, logistics of the use of that location, and the numbers, the objectivity of the numbers. I mean, there were a lot of numbers that were thrown around in terms of ticket sales and revenue projections that were privately sourced. And it was one of the things that the finance director was concerned about, as were we, is how reliable are those numbers? Like, what can our market sustain? And, then after that, I think having spoken with a number of other sources to generate the type of ticket volume that was outlined and revenue impact that was presented to us in the presentation, that really would make this venue in Little Wausau like one of the top 10 in the country. And how does that happen here? I mean, are we able to sustain those kind of numbers if they come, A, and B, will they ever come? And we've already heard from people who are in the industry of sourcing and booking talent that that's getting to be an ongoing struggle in this size of a market. So we wanted some, objective, independent numbers, hence the study. But the finance director was clear on the fact that we shouldn't be the ones paying for that. Taxpayer dollars. It's not the taxpayer's responsibility to determine if that project can fly or not. So, I think absent a substantial contribution to the study from the proposer, I just feel like we're stuck in neutral. I don't feel that we can move forward.
Thank you. Alder Lukens.
I would agree with Alder Rasmussen. I think that I hear from constituents all the time, about taxpayer costs. And as much as I love the idea of a venue like this, I think it's an ask for the city to pay that money, and also the contribution from the city when, it's really so uncertain too, the contribution for the development from the city. So I think that's, I would agree with everything Alder Rasmussen said. Thank you.
Any other questions, Alder Killian?
I would echo that. I too agree. I just wanted to ask, Madam Chair, I think the committee had received an email. Are there any related parties in the room who desired to comment on this? Is that an opportunity if they wish to? I just recall receiving an email earlier this afternoon.
I guess if I'm thinking, since it's more of an update, if the committee has questions that need to be answered by anyone, I would assume that would be okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions, discussion? All right, so there's no action to be taken on number 9. So we are at number 10, adjournment. So is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, Alder Rasmussen, second. Alder Lukens, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, adjourned. Or meeting adjourned.